Now, a vital word used in the Qur'an is the word Deen. This is a word which commonly is translated and thought of as meaning religion. However, in this video, I will show you how that translation loses a lot of the senses of the word and, importantly, downplays many of the theological implications of the term. So when we think of religion in English, we tend to think of a group identity, a group you belong to, but this is not at all the sense that the Arabic and the quotes of the Quran convey. What the Quran conveys with regards to the Deen is your system of obligations, your system of loyalty, who you are loyal to, who you worship, who you serve. These are what Deen as a term is actually conveying to us. It hasn't anything to do with group identity, labels, and that's why it's important to make these distinctions and to realize that religion doesn't capture everything. Before we get deeper into theology, we need to consider what the root word in Arabic tells us. The root of the word Deen is dal, ya, nun. It's a root that conveys senses of obligation, debt, owing, loans, bonds, judgment, guilt, recompense, being bound under authority. So already the root gives us a pretty strong picture that the word has connotations beyond, of course, just religion. It has connotations of what you owe, what is due from you, what you are liable for, what you will be judged on, what you are subject to. So obviously it's easy to prove that religion by and of itself is an insufficient translation for the word Deen. This is most clear in phrases like Yawm ad-Din, the day of Deen, which is commonly translated to day of judgment. A good example would be chapter 82, verses 17 through 19. And what will make you know what is the day of Deen? Then what will make you know what is the day of Deen? The day a soul does not possess for another soul a thing, and the command that day is for God. So in this quote, obviously we cannot really use the translation of religion. It would not capture the senses. The day of religion doesn't really make sense. But luckily for us, the verse literally explains what this day is and what its sense should connote. The day is the day a soul does not possess for another a thing, and the command is God's entirely. So it's portraying a day where authority is solely with God, judgment is solely to God, accountability is rendered solely to God, the settlement belongs solely to God. So it is portraying this sense of Deen, this sense of what is due, this sense of an obligation and settlement of accounts. Another striking example is in verse 24 to 25 of chapter 24, where it says, "On that day their tongues, their hands, and their feet will bear witness against them as to what they were working. That day God will fulfill them their true Deen, and they will know that God, He is the clear truth." So in this context, once again, it would not make sense to consider that God is fulfilling to them their religion on that day, though in some sense, maybe you could argue this. However, God is fulfilling to them what is owed. God is fulfilling their liability. God is fulfilling what comes due. He is settling their accounts, so to speak, on this day. And the day when their hands and their feet and their tongues will bear witness against them, everything they did will be settled. Everything they did will be accounted. Nothing will be forgotten. This is the sense we get from the verse. And additionally, they will know that God is the clear truth. So this is the connotation of their final accounting, we can say. And in their final accounting, if they hadn't realized it previously, they'll realize that God is the truth when accountability hits them. Given we've established the core senses of the word both linguistically and in Quranic usage in terms of the connotations of something due, something owed, rectification of inequity, the judgment, accountability senses of the word, then several additional senses develop. The first of these is law. We see in a few examples in the Quran. So there's a verse in chapter 12, verse 76, where it says concerning Joseph in the situation where he was taking his brother in Egypt. He could not have taken his brother in the deen of the king unless God had willed. So this quote makes clear to us a different sense of deen. Here, obviously, religion doesn't fit too well. He could only have taken his brother in the law of the king is the usual way it's translated, but the word is the same. It's deen, just as before. So how can we understand Deen in this verse? So here it's the king's governing order, you could say, his law, his authority, his system of judgment, what the person is bound to under the king, what he is obligated to follow under the king. So it still has fundamentally the same root. However, it picks up this connotation like law of the king, obligation to the king. So this sense of law or a system of obligations is also shared with regards to God's law or God's system of obligations, which we can look for in chapter 24, verse 2, where it says, the female fornicator and the male fornicator, lash each of them with 100 lashes, and let not pity for them take you in the Deen of God, if you are believing in God and the last day. So here, God's Deen requires a certain obligation, a certain punishment even. So it can be well understood as God's law here, contextually and linguistically. So we can see that the Deen is obviously appearing in a legal context. It's not about your private beliefs. It's not about your group identity for sure. It's about the governing order, your obligations, what you're bound to, what your punishments are, what you're liable under, and what you must execute as a servant of God who believes in him in the last day, who puts himself under God's liability, accountability. So it has this sense of a governing order, God's laws, God's ordinance. Now, another sense, which is kind of a secondary or derived sense of the word, but one that's vital for the theological weight of the word, is the sense of loyalty, of devotion, of exclusive allegiance. We can see this clearly in chapter 39, verse 3, where it says, unquestionably, for God is the pure Deen, or the exclusive Deen, and those who have taken protectors besides him say, we do not serve them except that they bring us closer to God in nearness. So what this verse is pointing out is, number one, that God, to him belongs an exclusive Deen. So what is an exclusive Deen? Well, it clearly is connoting exclusive loyalty, exclusive worship, exclusive obligation. So if we think about it in this context, we can see how the word has a sense theologically of loyalty. And then it gives us a beautiful counterexample to understand what disloyalty would be theologically. Those who are saying, while taking multiple protectors besides God, other entities to worship, other entities where they split their loyalty and their allegiance, yet they claim that they're doing it as a figment of their loyalty to God, as a manifestation of their loyalty to God. But God is pointing out basically the logical contradiction in the argument. You cannot be loyal to someone truly while being non-exclusive to them. Loyalty implies exclusivity. Loyalty implies that you don't split your loyalty to others. So another verse that shows this sense of loyalty is chapter 10, verse 22, where people embark upon a ship, and when hardship touches them, they call upon God, exclusive to him in Deen. If you save us from this, we will surely be of the grateful. So we see pretty clearly from this verse that somebody, even as a polytheist, can show a moment of exclusivity to God in a hard situation. It's not that they suddenly became monotheists and changed their religion, but in practice they did change their orientation to exclusive loyalty when mortal danger befell them. They forgot their partners, they forgot their other loyalties, and they directed their loyalty entirely to the only one who could save them. So they acknowledged that God was the only true source of salvation, that gratitude was owed entirely to God, and all their other loyalties and obligations dissolved, and it became effectively exclusivity to God. And now we get to the common sense of the word that is cited, which is religion. Now, we can consider chapter 3, verse 19, for example, where it says, indeed, the Deen with God is Islam, or submission. Now, it's correct to say that the religion with God is submission, but we have to say so remembering all the prior senses. The obligation with regards to God is submission. What is due to God is submission. What we are liable to God with regards to is submission. What we owe to God is submission. So if you understand those senses, then you can understand the sense of religion. It's the accountability you live under. It is the authority you live under. It is the devotion that you give. This is the sense. We can also look at chapter 4, verse 125. And who is better in Deen than one who submits his face to God while he is a doer of good and follows the religion of Abraham inclined, and God took Abraham as a friend. So this verse highlights that the system of obligations, the loyalty, what you owe, the best of these systems of religion in this sense is submission to God, submitting your face to God, doing good, and following Abraham's religion. So this system of loyalty, this system of obligation is the best one objectively. We can also look at chapter 2, verse 132. And Abraham instructed his sons and Jacob, O my sons, indeed God has chosen for you the Deen, so do not die except while you are submitters. So we see clearly that just as before, the Deen of God is defined as submission. So what is due to God is submission. What you're obligated to with regards to God is submission. God has chosen submission as your system of obligations, as what you owe to him, as what you will be held accountable for. So under this understanding, we can understand Abraham's perspective and why he's telling his sons to live by submission and more explicitly to die in submission, because this is what you owe God, this is what God has obligated you to, this is what is appropriate with regards to God, what the proper system is. All of these senses at once are conveyed. So overall, we don't find evidence through the broad usage of the term Deen. We really find zero evidence that a Deen, as far as the Quran is concerned, is a religion in the sense of an identity label or a group affiliation. Rather, it's a system of obligations. It's what a person owes, what is due from them. Eschatologically, it comes to connote the day of judgment, when your dues will be settled, the day of accountability, when you are accountable, and when what you owe gets due. Furthermore, applied theologically, it takes connotations of loyalty with respect to God, or can also be used to describe other loyalties, particularly divided loyalty and hence disloyalty. The connotations of religion theologically fit with and presuppose the prior connotations of obligation and due. So for those who are Muslim and identify as Muslim, they have to consider that Deen is not simply something that you were born into, not simply something you were given or that God favored you with simply, and now it's like you've achieved the goal. You are already upon God's Deen since you identify as Muslim and you perform the basic obligations. But that view, while probably common, is completely missing the core senses of the word and its theological implications. Your Deen is what you owe. It's what you are obligated to do. So your Deen is not something just that God blessed you with and now you can pat yourself on the back because you're Muslim. Rather, you now have acknowledged that you owe God. What you owe him? Everything. Your life, your striving, your wealth, your orientation, your devotion is owed entirely to God. Your governance structure, your moral structure, your judgments, your perspectives are entirely devoted, derived from God. So this is what you, being a Muslim, or you embracing this due of submission, this religion of submission, entails. It is a blessing. It is something that God favors people with. However, the favor is contingent upon you upholding your end of the bargain, you upholding your end of what you owe. And either way, for all of humanity, God has made a day of accountability, which we call Yawm ad-Deen, the day of due, where everybody will be informed about exactly what they did and every account will be settled. And this is why submission to God is the only rational position. So your Deen is not something you express only in the mosque. Your Deen is something that you express at every point in your life. Your loyalty to your Lord is always apparent or absent.